Hello, everybody. Welcome to day
Morning.
21. Day 21. I'm digging down deep into the Hanover High School shirts. This is juniors Powder Puff Football 2007. I still haven't recycled one. I was proud of that.
Mine is old school too, but
oh yeah,
it's actually Mrs. Davidson. Although I don't think any of these teachers have had them, but when she retired, I got gifted some of her things. So.
Nice. Roll calling. Alexis Knob, Jeffy Jeff, Kat,
Michael, Elijah, Emily, Darius, Abby, Mason, Dom, Zuli, Eli,
Radika, Reagan, Haley,
Emma, Jake, Maya, Cameron, Carissa, Brianna, yes!
That's the first I've seen that name, I think.
Brianna, if you need help getting to all the, anything, let me know.
I like when we see new names.
Mm-hmm.
Alexis Placus, or no, not Alexis.
Preston. We haven't seen Preston for a long time.
Preston.
Calling people out.
Gladys. Good morning, Gladys. I miss these kids so much.
I know. Diana,
hola. ¿Cómo estás?
You should feel special. My son is stomping upstairs right now. P.S. Like stomping.
I hear him.
Do you?
So, we're getting right into it today. So we've talked about mutations the last couple of days. So this whole DNA thing that we've been talking about really ends with looking at mutations, and then we come to the end of this unit, believe it or not. Thank you, Diana, for responding to my question. We come to the end of this unit by talking a little bit about biotechnology. So today we're going to start talking about biotechnology a little bit, and then kind of finish that up tomorrow. But I'm going to start by handing it over to Mrs. Smith and letting her run through some stuff, and then it'll flip back over to me. And this should be relatively painless, and it's actually really kind of interesting because this is like real life stuff that affects you and I. So what do I need to do? Add your screen? Your screen?
My screen. Boom. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about biotechnology today. And if you don't know, I actually do teach a whole biotechnology course that'll run every other year. And so when we talk about biotechnology, a lot of times people think about, Dolly the cloned sheep, and they think about, well, what is biotechnology? Specifically, if you want a definition, biotechnology talks about the manipulation of organisms. But people don't think about, whenever you eat cheese, you are actually dealing with a form of biotechnology. If you have a dog or another animal that's a pet, they were some form of biotechnology. And when I say that, I mean selective breeding. But we did all of that in order to get to what we want. It's a manipulation of an organism. So that's a very broad definition of it. But what we're specifically going to look at as far as right now for biotech is DNA technology, how we can study and manipulate genetic material. So I want you to think about this, okay? The crime scene. And there's so many shows out there. You'll notice I put a few of my favorites in there, if anybody can see what those are. And so when we talk about a crime scene, what's the point of a crime scene? Why, you know what I mean? Yes, okay, there was something that happened, but I mean, what do we do for it? It is not CSI, PS. None of those are CSI. Oh, Darius got my NCIS. To analyze the scene and to look for all right, well, we're not getting there. But what we are looking for is evidence. Okay, so people like Temperance Brennan from Bones, and when we're talking about NCIS, and we're talking about SVU, okay, we're looking for evidence. And so there's evidence technicians, and as they're looking for evidence, what are some of the types of things that they are looking for specifically?
This is going to be you. That's not going to be
Anybody?
I'm going to interrupt you 1 second, Mrs. Smith. Apparently, there's a problem with the attendance form. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. But I put the full link in, and hopefully that will be working for them now. I actually got the same problem when I clicked on it. That seems to be working. So
okay, so fingerprints are all well and good, but you know, if you have to deal with, you know, gloves, then we lose all fingerprints. So what are some other things that they are looking for? Okay, I've got hair from Radhika. Anything else? Yes, all right, I'll give you some. So we're talking about things like blood, hair, okay, fingerprints, like we said. And when we're dealing with all of that, when we're collecting blood, when we're collecting hair, why are we collecting those things? What does, right, and spit too, Cameron, anything that we can find. What do all of those have that we are looking for? I think Zuli had it up there. Okay, we're looking for DNA. Okay, we're looking for DNA. And why is DNA so important? Okay, DNA is going to connect us back to a particular individual. Okay, and so we can then do something called DNA profiling, where we're going to be able to analyze little DNA fragments to determine whether or not they came from the same individual. We can talk in terms of a crime. Okay, we can talk about paternity. We can look at the origin of non-human materials, you know, and talk, like even with COVID, you know, talking about where did it come from and looking at strands of that. And so when we're talking about this, we're talking about DNA. Now, here's the problem. If we want DNA and we're dealing from a crime scene, sometimes there is very, very little amounts of this information. And so what we can do is we can use a method that actually was not produced until the very late 1980s, which is called the polymerase chain reaction, or PCR. So basically what this allows us to do is to amplify or duplicate a specific segment of a DNA model. So we use this method to actually unwind, open the DNA, and then we use an enzyme in order to help create new strands of DNA. This should sound very, very familiar, like a process you might have heard of before. And then we're able to make exact copies of more DNA from maybe a single fragment or a single cell of that we find. So even a single cell that's left behind can lead us back to that individual through this PCR process. Okay. And so once we have this DNA, we kind of need to figure out, all right, how are this DNA different from this DNA, different from this DNA? If we have 3 samples of blood, are they from the same individual? Are they from different individuals? You know, blood is blood. It doesn't look necessarily different. So what we do is we take those samples. Once they're amplified, we start to cut it up. Okay, and we cut it up because we can get different lengths of fragments using restriction enzymes. So restriction enzymes are enzymes that cut DNA at specific sequences. And so what happens is when they cut it, it actually produces these little ends that we call sticky ends. And the DNA ligase can go back and join them together again, like glue with hydrogen bonds. Okay, so when we talk about this, there's all different sorts of restriction enzymes. They actually come from bacteria, and we use these bacteria enzymes to cut DNA. Why can bacteria cut our DNA? Because we all have the same genetic code. I'm not saying we're the same as bacteria, but I'm saying that every single living organism uses adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. So if we're cutting DNA, it doesn't matter what type of enzyme it is, like where it's from. So we can use the restriction enzymes that are used in bacteria for a lot of different purposes and use them to cut our information. So this is an example of some of the different enzymes, and you'll see the ECO R1 at the top. That's actually the very first restriction enzyme that we use that comes from E. coli. But you'll notice every single pattern is different. So basically that restriction enzyme will go across the DNA, and every time it sees that sequence GAATTC, it will cut it in between the G and the A. But DNA is anti-parallel. So it's also going in the opposite direction on the other end. So if you'll notice, if you flip it around, it's GAATTC on the bottom going from right to left. So it cuts it. And when it's done, it creates this sticky end that then has, is easier to put back together. And you'll notice there are a couple ones that they give what's called blunt ends, or like they're not sticky ends, but they still work in a similar manner.
That one is not a cow.
All right. So you ready for me?
Yep. Are you going to flip over to yours so you can click through?
I am.
And blood's not blue, by the way. I see like red blood, but blood is never really blue. I'm just pointing that out. Come take anatomy with me if you want to know why.
Or biotech if you want to learn more about this stuff. So this is interesting. So what does a traffic jam have to do with what Mrs. Smith is talking about? And so a couple things here. And there's one slide I just, as she was talking, wish I put in. I want you to first start by picturing a long piece of DNA, right? Like think about it. DNA has, it's not just 10 or 15 bases like we've been drawing out. It's thousands of bases, right? And so we have this restriction enzyme that she's talking about. It's going to read your DNA, and it's going to start to cut it up. So every time it sees a certain sequence, and if we go back one, every time it sees this sequence, it's going to cut it up. And that sequence is going to appear multiple times within a strand of DNA. And the thing is, everybody's strand of DNA is different. So it's going to appear multiple times, but in different places on everybody's DNA. And the amount of DNA in between where it occurs is going to be different. So imagine taking like a string and a pair of scissors and just starting to randomly cut up that piece of string. You're going to end up with all these little pieces of string that are different sizes. And that's important. Why is that important? Okay, well, let's talk about it. And that's where the traffic jam comes in. So I want you to picture this scenario. You are at school and you need to get across town. And it is a life or death, a serious life or death situation. You run outside the front door and there's only 2 vehicles available to you. You have to do this, life or death. There's a motorcycle and there's a tractor trailer. Which one do you take? This isn't a hard decision, right? I could wait in the chat, but I don't need to because it's not a hard decision. You know how to drive the tractor trailer. You know how to drive the motorcycle. You got to get across town. And this is what traffic in town looks like when you run outside. And what you can see right away is if you're in the tractor trailer, you're going to be stuck. You're this guy, right? You're stuck. I don't know if you can see my mouse on that. Barely. But look down here in the corner, the motorcycles, they're already like cruising out around cars, cutting in the middle lane. You can do that, right? So you can weave through traffic faster. So what does this have to do with, what does this have to do with DNA? Well, we just cut all these pieces, this DNA up into all these little pieces. And yours cuts up different than mine. Mine cuts up different than Mrs. Smith's. And Mrs. Smith's cuts up different than everybody else. So if we could organize all those different size pieces by their size, we could maybe compare them. And that's what somebody figured out. And so what they figured out they could do is something called gel electrophoresis. And I don't know, I'm having trouble getting things to move here. All right, so gel electrophoresis. And basically, they take this DNA sample. So, picture this whole process, right? Go to the crime scene to get DNA. You come back, you put it in a test tube. You do PCR to make more because you can't use what you found in case you make a mistake. So let's make a lot. So basically you're replicating it, right? Using PCR to make more copies. There's probably not totally right, but think about it. We're making exact copies of what we have in there. We take that, we cut it up using PCR that Mrs. Smith talked about. We take and we put it in a little well here. These are little wells on the gel. I'll show you a better picture of that in a minute. And we hit it with electricity, and the electricity pulls the pieces of DNA through the gel. So think of the gel as the traffic, right? Which pieces of DNA are going to move through the gel faster, the small pieces or the big pieces? I will ask that. So in the gel, what pieces of DNA are going to be able to weave their way through the gel faster, small pieces or big pieces? We'll wait for an answer on that one. Yeah, there he is. Nice. On top of it. So the small pieces. So if you go farther away from this well where I put the DNA, that piece must be smaller. And because everybody's are different sizes, some will move through faster and some will move through slower. Some people will have more pieces. Some people will have less pieces. We know the closer they are to the well, the larger they are, the farther away, the smaller they are. This is really brilliant if you think about it. We say things like gel electrophoresis and polymerase chain reaction and all these big words, and you guys freak out, when the reality of this thing is all we did was took a piece of DNA, cut it into pieces, and organize them by size. And then we compare the size of your pieces to the size of somebody else's to the size of somebody else's. So this is, to make it seem complicated, all this is like typically a piece of plastic, clear plastic container, not plastic, it's probably whatever, glass or plexiglass or whatever. We put the gel in, we hook it up to electricity, we pour in a buffer, electrophoretic buffer, right? A liquid.
Yeah, it's actually a TAE buffer. If you want to know, again, you want to know how to.
Right. If you want big words that make it confusing, right? But you don't need that. You just need to know there's liquid in there. We turn on the electricity, and the electricity pulls the DNA through the gel, and the small pieces move faster. And you can see the small pieces moving faster here. Here's what a gel looks like. I mean, literally, picture like a rectangular piece of Jell-O with little holes cut in it where you can fill those holes up with the DNA. Hook it up to electricity. And there's other steps. We're leaving stuff out. You have to dye it, and there's other things that you have to do. We're leaving steps out. But the important thing is we can now see these bands. These bands represent the DNA pieces that we're able to move through. And just looking at this gel right here, all right, so let's label them top to bottom. Row A, B, C, and D. Let's say row D is our murderer. This guy killed somebody. Row A, B, and C are our three suspects. Who's the murderer? Who's the murderer? If D is our murder sample, that's our crime scene sample. Row A, B, and C are our three suspects. So row A is the one at the top on the left here. B is the next one. C is this one. Yeah. That's how hard this is. Now, when I say that, when I make it easy, keep in mind somebody had to figure this all out. They had to figure out what enzymes and how to get DNA and how to separate it and how to put it, that stuff's the complicated stuff. Understanding what's happening is not. We cut up DNA, put it in a well, we separated it by sizes, and we compare it. That's not hard to understand. And that's what's amazing.
And that's really you need to know that basicness of it, and you need to understand, you know what I mean? You don't have to understand everything about restriction enzymes, but know that they're going to cut your DNA the same way every single time. So every single time, doesn't matter what sample it is, what cell it's from, if it's any cell in your body, you're going to get the same bands. That's why they can take a blood sample from a suspect and let's say like a semen sample from a victim that was from a suspect and see if it's that person or not. So it can be different cells in the body, and it's still going to be cut up the same way because it's the same restriction enzymes that are looking for that specific code.
Right, because your DNA is the same in every single cell in your body. And that's why we can call this a DNA fingerprint, because every time we use this enzyme, same enzyme on your DNA, it cuts up the same way, it will separate into the same band pattern. That's your DNA fingerprint. And so tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but there's going to be an assignment. And one of the things I added to that assignment is a little video. It's about a 20-minute video. You don't have to watch it. It's just there for fun, but it's called The Foot, and you could go look it up on YouTube after we're done here if you want. It's called The Footpath Murders. The Footpath Murders were the first time this was ever used to put somebody in jail. And the police had a guy sitting in jail that they were convinced was killing these girls. And when they ran DNA, they were so convinced that they had the guy that was developing this for something else run his DNA, and he came back and said, well, I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to watch it if you want to. It's really, really interesting. All right. So today, and we're at 20 minutes here. This is fair, I think. We have one thing that we want you to do today. You've done some two mutation handouts. We did a really short live stream yesterday. I haven't gotten a lot of the mutation handouts from yesterday. You were supposed to do that yesterday. It was called I think if you search Dominic on YouTube for The Footpath Murders, actually, you know what? I can give you the link before we go. If you're interested in watching that, it's in the thing for tomorrow, but you don't have to watch it, so I can put it there now.
Hey, I just realized we labeled both of those things mutations, didn't we?
Yeah, I did too. But since I'm trying, I noticed that after about 8 of them were turned in. Yeah, that was my fault. So the only other thing we want you to do today is in Moodle. If you look in Moodle, oh my gosh, let me pull it up. If you look at Moodle, it says, ooh, that's a neat one. If you look at Moodle, it says, sign into quizzes.com, take a mutations quiz. I think there's a 15-question quiz on mutations. We will announce the winner of that tomorrow. I might even put those grades in the grade book. I'm not sure yet. But sign into Moodle, or just skip Moodle and go straight to quizzes, sign in. There should be a quiz there for bio. All right? And that's the only other thing that they need to do today. And we will be back with biotechnology tomorrow. Look, I can make myself bigger than Mrs. Smith. She's so small over here. Look at her.
Yeah.
All right. So, anything else, Mrs. Smith?
I don't think so. Craziness in my house today, so.
Yeah, every day. Craziness everywhere. We're alone, but it's still crazy. All right, you don't have anything else? So with that, guys, thanks for coming. We enjoyed seeing you. We enjoyed talking to you. Get the mutations thing done. Take the little quiz. We'll see you tomorrow.
You go to quizzes and sign in with your Google account, and then it's there.
And make sure to watch the Hanover Nighthawk News that was put out again today for the second time. With that, stay safe. Wash your hands. We love you. We'll see you on the other side. Bye.